Hey everyone. So, as a medical professional, you are already an expert in your field. That's a given. But what if your English could truly match that level of expertise? What if you could go from feeling just competent to being absolutely confident? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. Let's get started. So, let me ask you a question right off the bat. You've got years of training, you've got incredible skills, you've got this deep well of knowledge. But does the language you use every day really reflect that level of professionalism? It's a huge question, because how you communicate can be just as important as what you know. Just look at the difference here. On the one hand, you have a statement that's fine. It gets the point across. But on the other hand, the language is so much more specific, it's more professional, and it gives this real sense of control and expertise. This is the transformation we're talking about. And trust me, it's easier to achieve than you might think. So, how are we going to get there? We're going to do it in 3 key steps. First, we'll upgrade your vocabulary. Then, we'll tackle some of that tricky grammar. And finally, we'll focus on how you can talk about your own professional value. So, step 1, and probably the quickest win, is all about vocabulary.
The secret here is using collocations. These are just words that sound natural together. So instead of saying you had a bad shift, which, let's be honest, can sound a little negative, try saying it was a challenging shift or a demanding shift. It totally reframes the experience and highlights your ability to handle tough situations.
Let's use that same idea for patients. Calling someone a difficult patient can feel a little judgmental, right? But what about challenging cases or high-risk patients? See how that immediately shifts the focus to the clinical complexity? It's just a much more professional way to talk about the situation. Now, what I love about this one is the shift in perspective it shows. Dealing with problems sounds reactive, like you're just putting out fires. But managing complications or handling emergencies, that sounds proactive. It sounds like you are in control, skillfully navigating what's happening. And of course, when it comes to clinical descriptions, precision is absolutely everything. Very sick is just too vague. In critical condition or having a severe presentation, that gives your colleagues a much clearer, more professional picture of what's going on. It's all about adding that layer of clinical accuracy. So, here's a quick summary of those upgrades we just talked about. The real key is to make these swaps a conscious habit. Every time you're about to use one of those basic phrases, just pause for a second and see if you can swap in a more advanced professional alternative. This table right here, think of it as your new cheat sheet. All right, with that new vocabulary in your back pocket, let's move on to step 2, grammar. Now, don't worry. This is not about memorizing a bunch of boring rules from a textbook. Think of this as learning the secret code that makes your English sound so much more fluid and natural. And we're going to start with one really important verb tense. We are talking about the present perfect continuous. That's have been plus a verb ending in ing. And this tense is an absolute powerhouse in medical English because so much of what you do, treating patients, gaining experience, monitoring conditions, it's all an ongoing process. And this slide breaks down its 3 main uses perfectly. You use it for ongoing patient situations, for describing your current professional experience, and for temporary activities that are still happening, like studying for an exam. You see the pattern? All of these things started in the past, but they are still relevant right now. So a common question is, when do you use the simple form versus this continuous one? Well, think of it like this: completion versus process. You use the simple form for completed actions or total numbers, like the clinic has treated 500 patients. But you use the continuous form to really emphasize the ongoing process, like the clinic has been treating patients all day. Okay, now let's talk about a super common trap that so many people fall into. It's the difference between stative and dynamic verbs. Basically, a stative verb describes a state, like know or understand. A dynamic verb describes an action, like examine or perform. Getting this right is a huge step up. But here's where it gets tricky. Some verbs can be both, and it all depends on the context. For example, you wouldn't say, I am thinking this diagnosis is correct, because that's an opinion, a state of mind. But you would say, I am thinking of referring the patient, because that's an active mental process. Understanding this little nuance is a game changer for sounding truly fluent. All right, now that we've got the building blocks of vocab and grammar, let's put them to work for your career. This third section is all about how to talk about your professional strengths, whether you're in a job interview, a performance review, or even just a conversation with a senior colleague. One of the most powerful ways to do this is by using nouns to describe your qualities. So instead of just saying, I am responsible, you can level up and say, I take great responsibility for my work. It's a simple switch, but it sounds so much more formal and impactful. This table is your toolkit for turning those personal adjectives into professional assets.
And here is what that looks like in action. Just imagine saying this in a job interview. You hear that? You're not just listing off adjectives, you are demonstrating your qualities by using powerful nouns like responsibility and curiosity. It just sounds confident, articulate, and shows a really high level of professional self-awareness.
Okay, it's time to bring everything we've talked about together. In this final section, we're going to see the full transformation by combining our advanced vocabulary, our precise grammar, and our professional self-description. Let's look at the complete before and after. First up, a case presentation. The basic version is, well, it's vague and pretty informal. But the advanced version? It swaps good for highly experienced, and it uses our friend, the present perfect continuous, has been practicing, to perfectly describe that ongoing experience. It's just so much cleaner, so much more professional. And here's that job interview again. Difficult patients becomes challenging cases. I have been a doctor becomes the much more specific I have been practicing anesthesiology. You're not just showing your experience, you're showcasing your specialty and your fantastic professional attitude. Finally, let's look at how this applies to written communication, like an email. The advanced version gets rid of vague terms like serious and fast action and replaces them with precise clinical language, like critical condition and immediate measures. It's clear, it's direct, and it conveys urgency with total professionalism. So, how do you make all of this stick? Here's your final checklist. Think of these 6 points as your guide for every professional conversation or email you write from now on. The key here is conscious practice. If you do that, these rules will quickly turn into natural, confident habits. And that brings us to the end. I want to leave you with one final thought. Look, you don't have to change everything all at once. Just ask yourself this. Based on everything we've covered, what is the one change you can commit to making in your professional communication starting today? Because that one small step, that's the beginning of the whole transformation.